Hi, I'm Josh124 and this is my commentary of my speedrun of the Fidgetts on Game Boy in 37 minutes and 34 seconds. This is also intended as a guide on how to speedrun the Fidgetts. And the first thing I'd say is a warning that this game can softlock on the final two bosses of the game. I got that both on the European version of the cartridge and playing the European version on emulator, so you might want to consider whether or not you actually want to speedrun this game based on that. Okay, let's get going. Okay, so in the first level there's quite a few tricks. The first one coming up here, you'll see that this jump is quite wide, and it would seem that the small mouse can't make the jump with its small kind of jump arc, but in fact it is possible to make this jump. It's pixel perfect. You'll find a lot of kind of jumps of this width throughout the game. I only actually go for 2 of these pixel perfect jumps. The one here, because it's so early on in the speedrun, saves about 3 seconds. And then there's one on level 4 that I go for, which saves somewhere between half a minute to a minute, I'd say. But I tend to get this jump about 1 time in 4, so I don't like to go for it more often than those 2 occasions. But as I say, jumps of this width are kind of throughout the game, so you could go for as many as you want to try and save the seconds here and there that you can. You can also kind of line it up by getting to the edge. That's what I do on level 4, as you'll see. Makes it a bit more consistent, but also, of course, takes more time. Okay, so it's just a case of getting the block over to there, and we want to get the small mouse to the left of these crates, standing on a block. Okay, so the big mouse is going to pick up a spring. Springs work kind of intuitively how they would normally work in games. You bounce on a spring, and the number of times you bounce on the spring increases your jump height. So if you bounce once, it's going to be a fairly small jump height. If you bounce a second time, it's going to go a bit higher, third a bit higher still, and so on. That kind of increasing jump height property is shared between springs, so if you jump on one spring and then move to another, you'll still increase the height as you kind of move between the 2 springs. That's only something I really use in the speedrun once. I'll point that out when it comes up. And also, in this game, you can switch between the mice, but you can only switch between them while the mouse that you're currently controlling is not in the air. So, in theory, on that basis, it would be hard to have both mice on a spring at the same time, bouncing in the air. But in fact you can manage that if you put a spring down overlapping a block that the inactive mouse is standing on, then that inactive mouse will start bouncing off the spring, and you'll still have your active mouse under control, and then you can kind of jump it onto the spring and have them both bouncing at the same time. That is quite time efficient. I use it a few times in the speedrun because kind of bouncing on the spring is what takes up a lot of the time in the level. And if you can have both mice doing it at once, it's quite efficient. So this is me setting it up here. And you'll notice that I've picked up the block. Now when you're in grab range of both a block and a spring, the game defaults that you pick up the block rather than the spring, so I knew I was going to pick up the block there because of the way the game works. So what I'm going to do with this block is something that I call kind of block jump. And what you can do is in midair you can drop the block and then kind of jump off it. You have to kind of be falling in order to do that, so that basically I guess you fall in line with the block and then you can jump off it. If you hold down the B button, it's a lot easier, because with jumps off of blocks you can just kind of automatically do them if you're holding down the B button. So if you jump onto a block and you've got the B button held down, you will automatically, like on the first frame that you hit the block, you'll jump off it. So I can use that here. You'll see I'm holding down the B button. And as soon as I go for this block jump, as soon as I'm dropping the block, I can just jump off it as soon as I come into contact with it. That gets me the extra height that I needed to get into the pipe. And I can do that quickly enough that then when I switch automatically back to the small mouse, I can just move it left into the pipe. The timing on that is fairly tight. Have to be tight getting the big mouse onto the spring and also getting the block jump. But if you are good with the timing, then you'll have plenty of time to move the small mouse to the left. Okay, and so what we have here is kind of a breakout style bonus stage. The mechanics, the kind of physics on this are a bit unstable. The ball will sometimes just go careering around the blocks, so don't expect things to be normal if you kind of try and play these bonus stages. But what you can do on these bonus stages is you can pick up cheese or you can pick up slingshots. And cheese is kind of the life system in this game, so it's shared between the two mice, and you start with 4 cheeses between the two of them, and every time you pick up a cheese on a bonus stage it just increases that by 1. So if I picked up this, I'd then have 5 cheeses to share between the two mice. Slingshots are a bit different there. Each mouse has its own kind of store of shots, and each mouse starts with 3. If I picked up this shot, it would increase each mouse's shots by 1. So they'd each have 4 if I picked up this shot. So in the course of this run, I tend to pick up cheeses, because in addition to increasing your lives, what they also do is they restore the life bar of both mice. That's quite useful. But I don't pick up any slingshots, because they don't really save much time to be shooting enemies. Picking them up costs too much time for it to be worthwhile. And generally on these stages, on these bonus stages, all I'll be doing is pressing A to get the ball off of the bat as quickly as possible, and then moving left to get out of the way of the ball when it's coming back down. Just end the stage quickly like that. Okay, level 2. So falling down here with the big mouse, you want to kind of first of all line up with this little area here just to the left of this slime, so that you can then fall down all the way down to the springs underneath here. See that gap? That's what you're aiming for there, to fall down. And then once you're through the gap, you want to kind of line up with this block here. So you want to be underneath this block, because this is going to put you between the 2 springs. Now ideally what you want to do is you want to be able to land on this crate and then pick up the spring. It's quite hard to get onto the crate. You have to kind of move at the very last minute so that you avoid actually bouncing off the spring. So kind of just clipping into the side of it there. And then once you've landed there, you want to pick up the spring and immediately put it down. So with these 2 springs, if you're bouncing off this spring, it's going to take 4 bounces to get back up through the hole that you just came through. But off this spring, it's going to take 3 bounces. Now the problem is this spring is currently positioned is a bit too far left. You can make that jump with how it's currently positioned, but it's very tough. So I like to move it just slightly to the right first, and then pick up this spring from down here, jump onto the higher spring, and then get the free bounces through there. Just like that. Then throw the spring from pretty much anywhere around there. It doesn't make much difference. And so from here what I like to do is I like to, you can see this kind of upside down T shape in the brickwork here. I like to walk just past the middle of that and then throw the block, and then that will be the perfect distance to kind of get the block down here for the small mouse to jump on. Then just exit the level from there. Okay, on this bonus stage again, just skip it. Okay, so on this stage you just want to start off holding right so that you can fall down, pick up the spring. And then bring the spring to this ledge here, put it down anywhere kind of on the right hand side, and then the small mouse can just kind of walk onto it and start springing immediately. Okay. Then put the spring down, get the small mouse jumping on there. Now you'll see here that I'm careful with picking up that spring. I tend to find that I pick up and drop it if I'm not careful. And then you want to put the spring around about here. You want it to be high enough up the slope so that you can do 3 bounces to get back to where you came from. And also far enough over to the left so that you can easily get up and get that block. Flipping a switch there, that opens up a later section of the level. And so here, what you want to do is you want to bounce off the spring twice, and on the second bounce you want to line up with this brickwork here, just hug right up against it, and then as you're kind of gliding through the air upwards, you just pick up the box on your way up. It will be within your grab range, and then you're preserving your kind of bounces on the spring. You don't want to land on this little platform here, because otherwise you'll have to start bouncing on the spring again and get up to your free bounce jump height. Okay, so here I want to line up the nose of the mouse with kind of the middle of this brickwork here, and then throw the block to get it over to the right. And when dropping this block, I want to make sure that it doesn't fully overlap with the spring, because I'm going to want to pick up the spring. And as I've said, if both a spring and a block are in your grab range, then you're going to be picking up the block. And I really want to pick up the spring instead here. And then it's just a case of taking the spring to that point and getting both mice up and over. This turtle can get annoying. Sometimes it kind of walks with you. I think you'll see that with the small mouse. It kind of walks in step with you, which will mean it's doing damage to you continuously as you're walking along. So I'd like to kind of avoid that. Yep, see it happens there, so I jump back to get out of step with it to avoid taking more damage than I need to. Okay, so this is the big jump. So This is the other pixel perfect jump I go for in this run. This one's quite important because it saves so much time, somewhere between half a minute and a minute. And I like to line this one up, so what I'm looking to do, I'm looking to edge towards the edge there, and I'm looking for the foot of the mouse to be either slightly more or slightly less than halfway over. I never feel like it gets exactly halfway over. I feel like it's either slightly more or slightly less. If it's slightly less than halfway over, I feel like I'm pressing left on the D-pad before hitting B to jump. Whereas if it's slightly more than halfway over, I'm right up on the edge, so I want to hit B and left at basically the same time. And in this case I'll be hitting left slightly first. Wait for this snail to kind of get out of the way first to stop taking damage from it. I'm going to shoot that snail when I land, because we go back and forth through that area quite a bit. I want to avoid the damage it can do to us. It's just a case of falling down and repositioning these springs to the left. This spring in particular, you want it to be overlapping the edge there, because you're going to have to get up on the third bounce to the opening at the top here. Particularly tricky with the big mouse because it risks bumping its head. So you want to have this over to the left and have the mouse probably slightly left of centre on the spring, so that you can guarantee that you get up into this hole easily. Shoot that turtle, because we're going to be standing there with the mouse and we don't want it to be taking damage all that time. Jump with the big mouse there to get onto the spring earlier. Fall here because you can't jump, you'll bump your head and you won't get onto the spring. And now the small mouse is basically at the end of the level, except for that gate in the way that the big mouse is going to raise now. You see that block there, that the intentional solution to this level is to bring that block to the start of the level so that the small mouse can jump that gap. Okay, so with this spring, you've got to have it kind of halfway up this slope to have it so that it only takes 6 bounces to get right back up to the top. Going to hit that switch to raise that gate later in the level. To be honest, I'd probably rather have the positioning of the spring slightly more to the left, because it's a bit awkward. You have to avoid bumping your head with the big mouse here. If you bump your head with a mouse while you're springing, that kind of resets your spring level, so you'd be back to starting at level 1 and a small jump on the spring. Then just make those jumps. They're not easy jumps those, so be careful with them. Okay, another breakout level skipped, and then we get to an action stage. So this is kind of a Tuban-esque level where you're just kind of going down. It's sort of an auto-scroller just on this craft with both mice. I've basically written myself a script for how to get through this level that I just kind of look at while I'm speedrunning. And to start with, I get to the left. Obviously you want to avoid anything through this level because it will just hit you and take a life. And when I get to this waterfall, I like to go right to avoid the turtle on the left there, but then I'm immediately moving back to the left. Going to keep to the left until this third waterfall coming up. Then I want to move over to the right hand side. I want to be hugging the left hand side of kind of any islands that appear. Okay, and then coming up on this waterfall, just kind of stay centre right after this waterfall. Make sure you don't hit that turtle, but roughly centre. If you have to move, move slightly to the right. And then go to the left from this waterfall. Kind of keeping centre left now. So keep to the centre, but if you need to move, move to the left. That's pretty much it throughout. I keep more to the left down here. I know that I could hug the left up there to avoid the rocks. Then it's just a case of moving to the right to avoid those last few blocks. And we're on to the alligator boss. Now the alligator boss is only vulnerable at one point, when his nostrils start kind of quivering, shaking. It's very hard to see, and in fact you'll see kind of online there's a lot of people frustrated with this game because they were never able to get past this boss, and neither was I, to be honest, as a youngster. But once you know that you need to look out for the nostrils quivering, you then want to collide with the nose, and that will do damage to the boss. You need to be a bit careful because the hitbox is a bit odd, so you want to kind of move straight up. You don't want to be coming in diagonally at it. Just move straight up to hit it when it's vulnerable. And I know that on the first hit, as soon as that lower lip hits me, that's my cue to move up. Then it's a case of the alligator's going to move over to the left here. I don't want to be hitting this eyeball, so I want to be to the right of this eyeball, but kind of as close to it as I possibly can get without hitting it. And then he raises up again, and the nostrils quiver, and you can just charge into him again, get that second hit, and it's just 2 hits. One thing there, we saw a password screen. That's the first password screen. And on these it's just a case of mashing A to get through them as quickly as possible. Don't do anything else. Don't press any buttons on the D-pad or press B or anything, because that can interfere with the mashing of the A. Okay, so this is the first time we're going to use the small mouse as kind of to give us a boost. Just a mouse boost up here. If you hold up with the tall mouse while you're overlapping the small mouse, he'll give you a bit of a boost, so you can get a better jump height that way. So these kind of pins on the floor here, you can't walk over them, you have to jump over them because they're raised slightly. You've got a block and a spring here. Throw the block from this leftmost bottle, that will get it to where it needs to be. And then with the spring you want to fall down with it. Yep, going slightly to the left to avoid this like workbench here, and then slightly to the right to avoid the barrel here, to get right down to the bottom. And then the small mouse can use that spring to jump up, pick up the box, and then over here you'll see a saw. Now this saw is a kind of one hit kill. If you collide with the saw, then the mouse will just die. The small mouse can get through this gap, and the big mouse can't. There's a switch that the small mouse needs to get to turn this saw off. Even with the small mouse, it's a bit you've got to be a bit careful. You don't want to just jump straight up left from there, say, because you'll then hit the saw. So you want to kind of jump up and kind of glide underneath it. So I'm a bit careful here. I don't take the full jump arc. With these pins down here, you want to be standing on the centre one so that you've got a little bit more height, and then you'll have the perfect height to jump on top of this barrel. Just like that. And then here, you want to line up with the right of this kind of block here, and then throw the spring, and then it will just kind of clip through the saw and land on the other side for the small mouse to pick up. Small mouse needs to take the block up here. then drop the block, jump off it. And here I do this a bit slowly, but what you can do is you can kind of jump up, hit the switch, and then glide over to the spring here, so that you just spend one jump to hit the switch and also land on the spring. But I don't quite get that, so I have to spend a second jump to get onto the spring. A bit slower. Switch to the big mouse and get the spring into location on this crate. I like to have it far enough along to the left so that I can see this wall, so that I can see when this secret section is available for me to kind of jump through. And it's just going to be the same thing with the small mouse. This is going to be the first bonus stage where I pick up cheese, and on this stage it's just a case of hitting A as usual and moving to the left, and that will automatically cause the ball to pick up cheese for you. Okay, so on this level it's just a case of getting the block over to the right. In theory this would be another pixel perfect jump you could perhaps make without the block, but the time save and the kind of risk of doing it, I didn't feel it was worth it. Now the small mouse is going to move to the left to pick up a spring. You will almost certainly take some damage here, but that's fine because we're going to refill at the end of the stage on the bonus stage by picking up another cheese. What we're going to do here is we're going to set up another spring block, so get the small mouse onto this block, the big mouse comes along, puts the spring overlapping with the block, then jumps onto it himself to get them both bouncing at the same time. Also picks up the block because that's going to be needed higher up. On the fifth bounce, move the big mouse slightly to the right to avoid hitting its head there. Drop the block there so that the small mouse has it later on. Small mouse is still bouncing here as the big mouse is walking along. You want to make sure you're doing this smoothly, and if you've done it smoothly then you'll come back to the small mouse just falling down to get onto its sixth bounce, which is the number of bounces it needs to get up to the higher area here. Okay, so this is another bonus stage where we pick up cheese, and what you need to do is you need to line up the paddle so that the right hand side of it lines up with the right hand side of the mouse's nose here. Takes me a little bit of time to get it this time. This is actually inferior time saving if you do it quick enough, because the level you see straight away ends as soon as you've picked up that cheese. So not only do you get the cheese, but you end the bonus stage quicker. This is a very simple level, just pick up the block. You need to drop the block here. I go off a bit with this block, mistake there. But if you drop it there, because it's going to be needed for the small mouse to progress in the level. And then the small mouse is going to need it again here, so just put it down, then the small mouse can jump on it, jump straight off. Try to do these jumps so that you're landing with the small mouse on each of those kind of logged areas. Avoid wasting jumps that way. Okay, so here things are going to go a bit quick. I'm going to move the small mouse quickly to the left, get a boost on the big mouse to get it up here, and then I'm going to switch back to the small mouse and move to the left. And as long as I do that quick enough, the small mouse will then be able to jump on this leaf. Won't have to wait for it to go back and forth, it'll be right there. Pick up that block. The big mouse picks up the block here. It could, in theory, pick up that block instead, but it's quicker to pick up this block and then get this spring. Drop it somewhere nearish the top of this slope. Then I believe it's 4 bounces. And the small mouse, if you've placed the spring correctly, can just fall down onto it. Saves a little bit of time opposed to jumping. Yes, the SG. So if you're wondering what the SG on this bonus stage stands for, this game only has one programmer, and his name is Simon Golding. If you look him up, you'll find that he's gone on to much bigger and better things, working on the Command & Conquer series, for example. Okay, so on this level, again we want to move quickly, similar principle to the previous level. We're going to be landing on something later in the level, and we want to move quickly in order to get there to land onto it in time. So you want to move the small mouse just to the left of this door. Boost up the big mouse. These flames here, they're one-hit kills, so you don't want to jump onto those. Instead, the small mouse can move to the left. And just flick that switch to turn them off, and then you can jump onto these stove areas safely. Make a bit of a mistake here. I jump onto that spring rather than picking it up, then bring it down here. The theory is up here there's a bubble moving backwards and forwards which can take us to the top right of this level. And in theory you can get up here quick enough, but because I wasted all of that time with the spring and the big mouse, I just don't get there in time. So the bubble will kind of get up to here and then we'll turn back. So you just want to jump on it when it's got about there with the small mouse, because the small mouse can't jump very far. But unfortunately I was too slow, so I knew that the jump wasn't going to be makeable. So instead I have to wait. Then move slightly to the right, because the big mouse is going to be waiting anyway for this bubble to come back. Take the spring and then jump up to the top of the level. So that mistake I made in that level cost quite a bit of time. I believe it cost about somewhere around 15 seconds, maybe 20 seconds. I'm going to skip ahead here because the small mouse is just going to make the same trick that the big mouse just did. Another bonus stage where we don't do anything. Okay, so on this level, take the big mouse to the second sofa, shoot this second tank here, because we're going to be standing around this second sofa quite a lot. And these sofas are kind of the middle part of these sofas act as springs, so you can kind of bounce off them. Takes 6 bounces to get up to the block that's up here. After the 5th, you should be able to see the block, so have an idea of where you need to move to pick it up. You can pick it up without landing on the shelf. Can just kind of overlap with the block and pick it up from there. Drop the block to the right of that sofa. That will allow the small mouse to come along and get onto that sofa. Now it's 4 bounces from the small mouse to get onto the picture frame here. The picture frame can be a bit deceptive. I think the width of it as an actual platform is just this kind of top section of the frame here, ignoring the corners, so be careful with that. And then just jumping twice to get to there. The big mouse doesn't need to bounce off the sofa, it can just jump up onto the fireplace here and jump up onto the cupboard there. Those are quite tight jumps, but are makeable. And now it's a case of getting up to this plant. Now this plant is another one-hit kill enemy. You don't want to bump into it, otherwise the mouse will die. There's an item at the top right of this level. I think the intended method is that you pick up this item, and if you bring it to the plant while you're holding it, then the plant dies. So the item basically kills the plant, and then you can just jump out over the plant pot and complete the level. But a quicker way is to just bring a block with you, and then the small mouse can jump onto the block and then jump over the plant. It is quite a tight jump. I tended to make that about 50% of the time, so it's not too bad, but it's quite tight. And then the big mouse, of course, can jump on the block and be well over the plant. Okay, so we're coming up to a boss here, and on the bonus stages before a boss, I like to be very careful because the bosses tend to crash or soft lock. So I like to hit as few buttons as possible. So you'll see me just hit the A once and leave everything else alone. And this is the dog. So the weak point on the dog is the nose there. So you want to just keep jumping into the nose. Now you can just kind of go very aggressive on it and just keep jumping into the nose. You don't have to wait for it to recover from being attacked. You'll see what happens here is I jump into the nose and then it's stunned. But I can then jump into the nose again. You'll see its health bar go down. So you can just keep jumping into the nose, and even when the dog's attacking you with this biting attack, you can jump into the nose while it's attacking and stun it and take health from it as well. So it's just a case of keep jumping into it, and that's the quickest way. Because the big mouse is flashing here, low on health, I take an intentional death here to refill the health bar of the big mouse. Gets 5 bounces to get into position to pick up the spring. And the small mouse can use the spring, and what you'll see there is I bounced once off the spring and immediately onto the middle part of the sofa here, which, as I've said, acts as a spring. And because I've bounced from a spring, I actually get the second bounce height here. Jump off of that wardrobe. Now here you want to have the small mouse kind of resting in this position. I'll go back and forth a bit there, but that way it will be safe from danger from those diagonally moving ghosts. With the big mouse you want to jump not quite right at the edge of this wardrobe, just slightly left of the edge. That means that you then land on this platform here. You can jump from there onto a step, and that just smoother movement saves a bit of time. In this case, putting the spring down and getting over the plant. Okay, so this is a very quick level. Starts with 50 seconds on the clock. Get the small mouse into position so that you can boost off it. And there's a spring there. And I like to throw the spring slightly right of centre of this cupboard here. That will mean that the tool mouse will be in a safe position, won't be hit by any ghosts. And the small mouse can immediately jump onto the spring. Needs to bounce 4 times off the spring to get up to this shelf here. It can't make the jump from the cupboard to the shelf, so you have to bounce 4 times from the spring in order to reach this shelf. Then it's just a case of walking to the end of the level. Okay, so here you want to get the small mouse just to the left of this mouse tub. And you can boost up onto the bathtub. Did I say mouse tub? I meant bathtub. And then these jumps here are a bit tricky. You've got to be careful because the big mouse will hit its head on that shelf above. So from the toilet roll you want to be right up to the right of it before you jump. And then bring the block down. The small mouse can get onto the toilet roll and then needs the block up there. And then on top of the toilet cistern it's going to need the block again. Get the small mouse just here. And then the big mouse picks up the block, throws it over this cupboard here to the other side and then boosts off the small mouse. Now here for this spring you've got to do 4 bounces. I only do 3 there, so that's a mistake. So I then have to go all the way back through. And there's some slugs coming up here. Want to be a bit careful with the slugs because they can overlap you while you're walking, so if you're walking past them and they're walking with you, they can do a lot of damage to you. So I switched there because I was worried that that second slug might do that to that big mouse. It caused me to lose a lot of health. Small mouse needs this block in order to make this jump. The small mouse can just safely jump over these slugs. The big mouse can't because it will just hit its head on the ceiling and then go back down into the slugs. So another bonus stage to pick up cheese. Okay, so just moving the big mouse over to the right of the stage. Don't have to jump off that cupboard, it's better to fall onto the sofa. Then 4 bounces, move to the right. Here I want to jump slightly left of the edge there so that I can then get smooth movement jumping onto the bed. Okay, and then bring this block back to the left so that the small mouse can then jump up onto this first sofa. We're actually going to do 7 bounces off this sofa. Okay, so this is the 5th bounce, and if I just left the mouse in that same position, it would land on that shelf, just there, and that's not what I want. I want to be higher up than that, so I have to move over to the right here to avoid landing on that shelf. And then be in position to land on these shelves over here to the right. And the small mouse can just jump up and get to the end of the level. Bring the block around with the big mouse here, 5 jumps, up onto that shelf. I attempt a block jump there, I don't make it. Would have saved a little bit of time, but can just jump off the block over to the right, get through to the end of the level from there. Much quicker line up this time to get that cheese. Okay, so another boost here to grab that block. Then need to bring that block over to these spikes here. You can jump off the block, and there's going to be a spring to the top right here. Need to pick up. And then just want to fall down this hole here, avoid that. And then get the small mouse up there, jumping off the spring. Then you're going to want to bring the spring up, so get the block out of the way, then pick up the spring, jump off the block. Use the small mouse on the spring there just to get up and onto this crate. And then put the spring down on the crate in a position where you can see to the left, so you can see where you need to get to. Just skip forward a bit here. Yep, that's good. Okay, so get in position so that you can boost up here to get this block. I like to switch to the small mouse so that both of the mice are in kind of this configuration to avoid this diagonally moving bat. And the small mouse moves along after jumping on the block there. And the big mouse brings the block along. Small mouse, big mouse can't fit under there, so the small mouse has to get that spring. And you want to get the spring up onto the shelf here. So I'll go for another block jump here, and if I bounce off the spring 3 times, I can try a block jump at the top of the 3rd bounce to try and get enough height to get through this secret wall here. I don't get it, and what I like to do with this trick is when I don't get it, I like to fail it kind of early, because if you drop the block late and you manage to block jump off it, you might not get the required height to get up through that secret area, and if that's the case, then you'll land back on the spring, but you'll be back at kind of level 1 of the spring bounces, so you'll then have to bounce 4 times to get up through that secret area. So if you're going to go for this block jump, then you want to kind of make sure you do it early rather than late, so that if you miss it, the block just drops harmlessly and you don't reset your spring jumps. And for the small mouse, it's just 4 bounces. Okay, so we're coming up on the soldier boss fight here. Here I am very careful because this is a boss fight that can crash. What will happen is that you'll hear the boss music start up and then the screen will go white, and that's just the game's crashed and you can't continue on. I've found that one thing that causes this to happen is actually mashing A on this bonus stage and holding left on the D-pad, which is kind of my default method of getting through these bonus stages. So in this case I just press A once and leave it at that. I said it earlier, I think it's best to avoid any unnecessary button presses on bonus stages preceding boss fights to avoid soft locks and crashes. Then it's on to the soldier, and you'll see I just move slightly to the left there, just kind of one mouse whips from the left, and you'll see the toy soldier blink. When it blinks, that's my cue to kind of jump up and then jump onto the bayonet. And then once on the bayonet, it's an up left, so that you're kind of hitting the centre of the nose of the soldier with the centre of the mouse's body. Here I'm going to take some intentional damage. I'll lose a life, but what that means is that will set me at maximum life bar for the rest of the game. Because the next few levels I'll be taking a lot of damage, so I need that kind of maximum life to get through the rest of the game. Okay, I'm going to shoot the bee here because it gets in the way. Walking backwards and forwards, you're going to take damage from it. Then just throw the block over that pole there. Then the small mouse can jump on that block to get over the pole. Nice simple level there. You'll notice that I'm quite careful on these last 3 stages because I don't want to take too much damage and potentially take a death. These levels can be quite dangerous for damage. Okay, so here it's just get this big mouse to pick up the block from the left hand side here, bring it back to the right for the small mouse, and then kind of shepherd the small mouse through the level. So this flying monstrosity here, it won't do damage to you as long as you're kind of on the ropes here. But if you're on these poles, then you will take damage from that flying monstrosity. Okay, and just fairly careful here. Want to avoid the enemies. The bee in particular, because it's so slow moving, it overlaps with you for a long portion of time. And you can't really avoid it, unfortunately. Okay, so this is the last puzzle level. Jump off that pole, you can't fall off it, you need to jump off it to get here. And then shoot that flying monstrosity because it's going to get in the way. We're going to be going backwards and forwards here. I'm going to set up a spring block trick over here, so we don't want to be potentially overlapping with it and taking a death. Get the spring and the block to the right. You can just throw the spring like that. Then get the spring over to the right here. You need it quite far right in order to get back up to the top of 4 bounces. There's plenty of room there. And then again, it's a case of shepherding the small mouse through the level, jumping on the block. You see I take it a bit slow, a bit careful to avoid this bee here. I'm going to shoot the bee so that we're not taking any damage from it. Then need to get the block onto the pole here. Preferably, yeah, just overlap over the edge there just a bit, so that the small mouse can then jump up on it and then make that jump. Then we want to get the spring and the block over to the left here. Preferably should be a bit further to the left, because what you'll see happen here is that the tall mouse gets to the exit, but the small mouse isn't far enough to the left where I felt confident I could just move left to the end of the level. So I kind of chickened out a bit there. But if the spring was further left, then I think I'd have been able to make it comfortably. So this is the last bonus stage. I try and get this last cheese. I don't think I manage it. No big deal. Then it's on to the ballooning stage. So this is another auto-scroller. It's basically a shmup. And just avoid all the enemies, shoot them if they're in your way. At the start of the level, I kind of stay near the top to avoid the mines. And these planes that are coming through. Picking up that A gives you extra ammo down here. Picking up the I will make you invincible for a period of time. The main hazard is these zeppelins that drop from the sky, and also these birds because they have quite an irregular wavy pattern. They're quite difficult to shoot and they will get in your way quite a lot, so you do need to shoot them. You'll see I'm missing that one there and I just dodge out of the way. The enemies, the Zeppelin enemies that fall from the sky, they do track your position. So if you're at the top, it would just move down slightly and then start shooting you from there. So it's best to remain kind of in the centre of the level so that you get enough time to react to it moving down, and then you can just kind of avoid it by moving up. That's what I tend to do. There's also rocket enemies at the bottom of the level. There's one hiding behind the cloud there, and when you kind of move over kind of the x-axis that they're on, they will raise up to try and hit you. But they're fairly easily avoided as long as you know they're there. Yep, so just keeping fairly central. Could shoot those enemies if you want, but I find it just easier to avoid them. Okay, so here I think we've got some rockets. Yeah, just one rocket. Want to charge forward there and then shoot the bird. I think it's these ones, isn't it? Yeah, this set of three. Want to charge forward but then immediately move down and back when you've avoided the rockets to avoid that plane that was coming through there. Take that invincibility and move to the front so that you can then clip through this chimney. And I just like to kind of, once I've dodged, I just like to take my hand off the controller, just let the level finish naturally. I've got a theory that that helps to avoid the soft lock on the final boss. Then you'll see we're back to the big mouse here, and you've got to go through the auto scroller again. So I'm just going to skip through that. Well, it's quite long. Okay, and that's the end. Okay, and the next level is this train track level. So just hold up as soon as you start the level and you'll start moving forwards. If you want to take the left path of any junction, you hold down the B button. If you want to take the right path, you hold the A button. So the first right path that you come to, you want to take that one, so hold down A. And then we'll have a bridge coming up here, and then after the bridge you want to take the left path, so holding B here. Then immediately after that you want to take the right path, so hold A. And that's all there is to that level. So you can just hold up and you'll avoid everything, including that train there, which looks like it should hit you but doesn't. Okay, and onto this 3D maze level. I do find this level quite interesting, so I'll probably do a separate video on it. But for the purpose of the speedrun, it's quite easy to get through. It's actually a very large mage, it's much larger than you'd imagine. So what you want to do is you want to move forward until you hit a wall, and you're going to be turning right. Then you're going east now. Then when you hit a wall, you want to turn left. Then you want to take the first left that you get to. Then you want to take the first right that you get to. Move forward to the end here. Then you want to turn right here, and then move forward and take the first left that you see, and then just keep going forwards from there to get to the end of the level. I actually make a mistake here because I turn twice and then I start heading south rather than east as I should have done, but luckily I'm able to just kind of get myself back on track. Okay, and then it's the final boss coming up. The final boss does have a tendency to soft lock, so I like to again take my hand off the controller here. Don't press anything I don't need to. And so when this boss soft locks, what happens is you get trapped on this right hand side of the screen. The game won't let you move any further left than this. You can hold the left direction and you'll see the mouse's walking left animation, but it won't actually go left. You can even jump, you can try and go right, it won't let you go right either, so you'll be stuck here and you won't be able to hit the cat and the cat won't be able to hit you. I'm a bit slow there, I was a bit hesitant because worried about that soft lock. You can actually get to this cat before it starts sniffing and hit it. The way to hit the cat is to walk right up underneath its chin and jump straight upwards. But when it's sniffing, that doesn't work, it's invulnerable while it's sniffing. So I'm going to set it up here. And so what you want to do after you've hit the cat, you want to land slightly to the right of this kind of rightmost star of its dazed animation. This is maybe a little bit further right than I want to be, but it's still fine. And then when it wakes up and retaliates, you want to wait for it to retaliate and then jump up left, and that will hit it while it's trying to attack you, while you're kind of clipped into it there. Then we want to repeat the same process again for the third hit. And then after 3 hits, you'll actually be able to put it into a kind of a stun lock state, where when you land here, if you jump immediately upon landing, you'll hit the cat again, and then if you jump again, when you land next, you'll hit the cat again. So you'll see it's just a case of landing and jumping immediately in order to keep doing damage. So kind of the cue, you could kind of listen out for the damage that the cat will be doing to you while you're overlapped here, use that as a cue to jump again. Or you could keep an eye out for kind of the flashingness of the damage being done to you. Use that as a cue to jump again. As long as you keep jumping consistently, you'll be fine. It is possible to kind of get yourself trapped in the right hand corner. If you kind of drag the cat over to the right, it might get into a position where it's actually not possible to hurt the cat because it's too far over to the right. You can't hit its hurt box, so you want to avoid that. And then that's the end. So yeah, a few mistakes in there, so I might try and improve upon this at some point, might revisit this speedrun. But for now, thanks for listening, and if you intend to speedrun this yourself, good luck.